So you see a lot of the time a fast turnover of PTs in these facilities. So the qualification scheme to become a PT is very low now. So you can do it online. You can do it in a matter of weeks. So how much information you can actually learn over that time is pretty low.
That's always been something, because I've had 4 or 5 PTs in the years, and everyone has provided slightly conflicting advice.
Yeah.
And then if I go and check that piece of advice online, I'm like, and then you just end up in a world of just being a bit confused around what should I be doing for training? What is the right nutrition? And then it's like, sometimes it's, and I think when I started to really understand why the advice could have been conflicting, and it was that it felt like the barrier to entry. Someone could do a 6-week course.
Yeah.
My cousin's a quite a well qualified PT and runs gyms and stuff, and he was like, 6-week course.
Yeah.
It's like, how could you possibly learn everything about nutrition in that time? It's just impossible.
And there's no real governing body that keeps
No.
everyone in check. There's no one making sure you do CPD. There's no one making sure you're insured. There's no one like managing the system. It's just qualification, go work in the gym.
But that means, and this is the thing, because if you're a lawyer, you can't give incorrect advice. You can be sued over that sort of stuff. James Smith actually talks a lot about this. I don't know if you follow James Smith. Yeah. So he talks a lot about this, which is then you can sign up to a PT and they can give you incorrect advice, which isn't quite right for you for whatever reason. Then you can get that conflict. And he's obviously, James Smith was always quite no bullshit. And that it was a lot of years before I found James. And then I was like, oh, that seems more right.
Yeah.
Because he was able just to say, right, if you want to lose weight, it's a calorie deficit.
Yeah.
That's it. And I swear, all those five PTs could never give me that answer. And I was like, that's all I was trying to do at the time. So I was a bit overweight. And I was like, all I need to do is try and reduce my weight. But I couldn't. Is it paleo? Is it keto? Is it this? Is it that? Is it high fat, low fat? I'm like, flipping out. I'm going around in circles.
People can't give like real simple objective advice. It has to be like cookie cut, at least paleo, whatever it may be. Like, fine, cool, whatever. But essentially, it comes down to the same reason. You're still in a calorie deficit. If you go keto and all of a sudden you don't eat pasta, rice, bread, donuts, whatever it is, all these things that you overeat, you all of a sudden cut those out. Chances are you're going to be in a calorie deficit, and it's as simple as that.
When did you know this? Just like, is this something that you learned as part of your early training, or is this something that came later? Or
it's probably later, to be honest. Like,
because it felt like for years no one really knew, and then when
it exploded.
It seemed to explode after James said it, and then other people. Because even
I think James was still late to the bandwagon. He wasn't one of the original people, but like
Okay.
people, the top of the field was like Lane Norton, Eric Helms, those kind of guys who are out there putting out the information.
right.
Lyle McDonald, those kind of guys. They're all kind of like the top of the food chain, doing the studies, etc., promoting. So yeah, it's kind of like you can't sell those products. You can't sell calorie deficit. So
No, it's just a fact.
yeah,
It's just a fact.
and I try to not do food plans, and I try not to do anything that's like all these fancy little things that are gonna, fluff it out. We essentially go, right, what we need to do for this person is correct calorie deficit. Now we need to find out information about this person, and how we create that for them is the best way for them. Whatever they do and they can stick to is the best way. So it doesn't matter if it is keto, if it is paleo, we need to know you're eating less calories now than you were. Whatever your maintenance is, we need to be below that. And we just go by that. So, do you want to do intermittent fasting? Do you want to create scenarios? Does this suit your eating pattern? When do you most likely overeat? What's your relationship with food like? Who does all the shopping in the house? Can you have more control over this? Where do you snack? All those kind of things. And then create the food diary around that, rather than go, right, what you're going to do is eat 5 meals a day. It's going to be this, this, and this. Because again, that doesn't work. Because people might be able to stick that for 4 weeks, 6 weeks, but no one lives off a food plan. Like, life doesn't work like that. You work in sales. I'm sure you go out for sales meetings. Like, you can't stick to a food plan there.
Well, you can't most of the time.
Yeah.
Especially in normal life, especially since COVID, so especially since having a baby, since working at home.
Yeah. It's
and
just,
and then you're in meetings, you can't stick. That's life. You just can't stick to these things.
Mm.
You can have your foundations now. After loads of years of me doing this, I'm like, okay, I've got some foundations now, which I'm like, after doing all of these different things, I'm like, oh, I just take the best of all of them.
Yep.
Doesn't mean it's perfect, but it, you know, and there's loads of times I go off the rails, but at least I know the basis of trying to maintain reasonably healthy. And, you know, and actually over time, once you've done it lots and lots of times, you're like, I can actually not use the fitness trackers and all that sort of stuff now, because I know my breakfast is 400 calories. I'm happy with that. I don't need to worry about it. And but that information almost wasn't available 10 years ago, or I couldn't find it. I really struggled with those PTs.
Social media has helped this come to light, I think.
I think so.
Massively.
Yeah.
And the cream's rising to the top in that sense. So hopefully fitness has turned a corner, but you're still going to have lots of people out there with misinformation. And people like Lane Norton are always calling people out.
Right. I don't know who that is, actually.
That's one person worth have a look at. So
Yeah.
check out Lane. Like, he'll aggressively call people out, but, you know, for the right reasons. He's great to good. He's that guy on Instagram, social media, trying to fact check people, you know. So he does a good job of that.
So what was it, you were talking about how you start to recommend clients. So someone new comes to you now and says, I'd like to lose some weight.
Yeah.
What's your kind of line of questioning? What are you going to try and... Because I mean, you've worked in being a PT for a lot of years now. Is that what normally happens? People want to come to you with something simple, I'd like to lose weight? Or do you find it's bigger than that?
Definitely on the surface, people want to go, right, I want to lose weight. Body composition is always most people's goal, right? Trying to look better naked. That's the essential, right, how can we look better naked? That's all most people are focused on.
Really?
So for me, the way I create buy-in is go, right, can we attach that to a performance goal? Because if you're trying to constantly drill people on how to look better, it gets very like mentally draining. Because you're like, right, if you can do these things, just by default, you're going to be a fitter, healthier person. And we've created like a little side challenge to the actual challenge. We go away and focus on that. And then along the way, you end up with the results you want anyway, rather than just being so focused on the vanity side of things. We have this little, you know, whatever it may be that they're interested in, like increasing sets and reps and weight or whatever they're doing. They're getting better as a human by more compound liftings with good techniques. But essentially, we find out what they're interested in, how many times a week they can actually train, what their commitment's like, their motivation, where that comes from. Is it intrinsic, extrinsic? Like, are you just there because their friends coming to the gym? There's so many different areas we want to look at before we go away and create a plan for someone. We need to know what they're coming to the table with, if that makes sense. Do they do the cooking in the house? Do they not? All that kind of stuff. We really need to have an understanding of these things, and just so you can create realistic goals.
Yeah. What do you think's the biggest challenge when someone starts thinking, oh, I want to be fitter, I want to be healthier? What do you think those barriers to entry are? What's the common pushback, I suppose, you get, or the areas where people just aren't, you know, trying to go from a lifestyle where they're not training, they're not eating the way that they wanted to. A lot of people, if you ask them and say, would you like to look better, would you like to feel better, they're going to say yes.
Yeah.
But it's that big gulf in between the years, or just making those changes. I know when I started going on the journey, I was like, I really want to do this, but then there's it's all those temptations. There's so many things that will send you off on a different journey, as in drinking or whatever, overeating, and then, you know, food tastes good, alcohol's nice. Yeah. And it's just, there's so many temptations to kind of take you down the wrong path. And then people have like a psychological connection to food. And that is, well, I want to have the things that I want to have. But then also you start eating those foods and then very quickly you're like, well, I want to also be fit and healthy. It's really hard to get
a good balance, right?
Yeah, it's really hard. I think that's almost the hardest thing.
I think you have to accept you're not going to be like stage ready as well.
Yeah.
Like,
a lot of people come to the gym going, oh, I'm going to try, and that was me all those years ago. I'm going to be ripped in 90 days. I'm going to do this, and this, and realise, oh, I never made that goal ever.
I mean, it's possible, but are you willing to give up what you need to give up to get there? Like, it's quite and a lot of people, when they do get to those kind of like levels of low body fat, aren't happy, they like the idea of it. They're no happier as a person. So what's the point getting and suffering when you could be in great condition, just not like absolutely ripped? You could still be, you know, athletic, strong, fit, just not absolutely ripped out and shredded. Like just a stage away from that is much healthier and maintainable. Trying to maintain that is a nightmare.
Yeah. I can imagine trying to achieve that is a nightmare as well, because you literally have to give up everything. But it's also, it's like you see this image of someone and think, oh, I want to look like that. And then if you know how much effort and how much sacrifice you have to give up, I think what I always liked about what James said years ago was just that he was like, well, what would 70% of that look like, or 60% of that look like, and actually trying to maintain that throughout the year, and having a bagel or having something else that you like to eat, and actually having it, because he was talking a lot more about balance and wellness, and also just setting yourself realistic goals. You know, I went down that trap constantly of just going like, right now, this is the time. Now this is the time, and I'm going to really focus. And then invariably you get to that 3 months or 6 months later. I remember once I'd given up alcohol for, I don't know, 4 months or so, and everyone was going out having fun, and I was like, I am sad. I'm like, I was like, I'm just staying in on a Friday night. Everyone else is going out, and I'm not, because I want to look a little bit better. I was like, this isn't. Then your mental health doesn't go in the right place, because you're just thinking, what's the point of this?
Yeah, get down the shots.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that sweet spot is really important. Finding that sweet spot and being happy and content in there with, you know, you might go through phases where you lean a little bit towards the fitness, and a phases where you go, right, I'm a little bit too party and I'm having a little bit too much fun. I'm going to go back and find that sweet spot. And you go swings and roundabouts around that. But essentially you should be content where you are in that sweet spot of like, I think you're a good example, to be fair, where you've done lots of other things, but life is life, and you do what you can do, and you get by that way. So having that balance of, you know, like you said, with your food, you know how much that is because you've got good eating habits now. So you don't have to over stress about it. So you know this is your most common breakfast. You know how much that equates to in calories, roughly. And you know if you overeat on a Friday night, well, you can just undereat the next day or split that off over the next 3 or 4 days. You know, if you had a pizza and whatever on a Friday night, there's no reason why you couldn't burn some more calories the next 2 days, or drop the calories off again, and you're back to where you were. Like, we don't need to overanalyze and, you know, oh, I've had a pizza, therefore I'm going to have the cookies, because that's what Domino's have sent on the side. Well, I'll have that. I don't have to absolutely ruin my diet and go really heavy just because I've broken this diet. We need to be a bit more able to correct ourselves. Go, right, well, that's that much. This is just a maths equation, essentially, and try to have less emotion attached to the diet or the phase of what we're doing, and then be like, right, well, I've done that now. This is what it was, and now I'm going to make up for it in this way, and so on and so forth, and move on and not overanalyze it. Just be a bit more rational about it.
Because, I mean, if you do overeat by a pizza or a bunch of calories one day, like you said, it's a mathematical equation. You can just reduce it a bit later. Got a friend. We can just reduce it later. It's like, it's not the worst thing in the world, and especially if you start working it out over a week or over a month. Eventually, things just balance themselves out.
Right.
Because on a Monday or a Tuesday or whatever, there's no chance I'm going to be eating that massive pizza. Yeah. You know, because I'm busy with work, and people are busy with work, they're getting on. Actually, you can go, well, I can have 4 or 5 really reasonably healthy days because I'm busy. You can prep your food and just, it's all that stuff at the very beginning. When someone's first trying to get into training and into all that stuff, they just don't know that.
No. But experience goes a long way, and having to understand that, right, I don't need to panic. Like, I just don't need to have this panic over having a nice piece of food. If I'm honest, ladies do it a bit worse than men, or they vocalise it more than men anyway. They come in, oh, I've gained a couple of pounds. I'm like, well, what have you eaten? Oh, I've had this and that. Oh, that's quite salty and carbohydrate. So you're going to gain a bit of water weight based off that, because you're going to hold the water out of those carbs. Right. Don't worry about it. It will come off. Like, it's just water weight. It's a fluctuation. Don't worry about it. Move on. But having the confidence to do that, is different to like having the stress and the emotion attached to it. So being right, I know what's going to happen, and just go through the process of being right. If we're working out someone's calories according to the week, and they had this high day, we can literally offset it slightly throughout the rest of the week, and now back at net zero. They are where they would have been anyway. Some people like to do like we like a smart 5-2 approach, where you go, right, this is calories for the week. You're going to do all of your dieting on 2 days.
Right. Okay.
So you're going to eat the rest of your nutrition and calories on the other days, but you're going to have like super low days and do basically what your calorie deficit would have been across the week all on 2 days. So you're still going to eat. You're still going to try and hit your protein target.
What should that be? Just
so roughly, we just 1.8 grams per kilo of body weight. That's like for an adult trying to gain muscle mass. That's a good place to be.
So what's that work out? So if I'm trying to think for someone listening, so if I'm 75 kilograms, what's the equation there?
140-ish.
140. And will that help me with growth, or will that help me with maintenance?
Both. Both. So you should be able to build muscle with that.
Right.
As long as you're eating enough food on top of.
And if you're below that, what's going to happen? Is it just the fact that you just won't have enough protein to grow, or to maintain?
Yeah.
Right.
It's like if you're a vegan, it's going to be a bit harder unless you get your protein intake in.
Right.
So, in theory, if you're a vegan, your ability to gain muscle is the same, as long as you do the things you need to do to hit your protein target. Just in actual practice, it becomes a little bit more difficult because you've got to get from beans, legumes, lentils, all that kind of stuff, soy, and all the options that they have. And the amount of food the volume of food you have to eat is phenomenal to hit your protein goal. So I've got one client who's vegan, and he manages to do it all the time. He's very into lifting and his training. He's gone from low 70 kilos to 80 kilos with a lower body fat. So over the period of like 4 or 5 years, he's gained kilos of muscle mass. But it's taken years. It's not a short-term fix. It's taken years and years and years. And he's done it. So he takes like additional leucine, which is an amino acid for muscle growth. So it stimulates muscle protein synthesis.
Okay.
And he's very particular, and he makes sure he A, hits his calories, and B, protein intake. And he builds plenty of muscle.
And they're the two key metrics to worry about, really. Whether you're trying to put on weight, lose weight, it's the number of calories and then the protein. Yeah,
that's what I would focus on mainly. Always that first, and then anything after that falls where it falls. So we're looking at, right, what does that person need to do to hit the calories? And then we need to fill those calories with proteins, fats, and carbohydrates. So personally, for body composition, we go, right, what's the protein intake? Correct. 1.8 grams per kilo. Work that out. And then that's going to take out a percentage of their calories. And then the rest will be made up of fats and carbohydrates, and we go from there.
Right.
And then again, you base it off what does that person's food habits like. Do they have a preference for carbohydrates? Do they have a preference for fats? And those generally have a push-pull relationship. One's higher, one's lower, or vice versa. So you might go, right, that's their protein intake. 20% of their food is going to be from fat, and the remainder is carbohydrates, or vice versa. I mean, that's like the first stepping stone we'll take.
Right.
And we'll go from there.
So when the first step of that, let's talk about the calories then. How do you know what sort of level? Because you were saying before it's about maintenance. So how can you figure out what your maintenance calories is to start with? Because I guess that might change over age or your body weight, or so how would you firstly know where you are on that? Is there any way of working that out?
So you've got like Harris-Benedict formulas and stuff like that, and you put activity on top of that, like a multiplier for activity. So you can do that, but you don't actually know until you eat your food of a predicted maintenance and you find out. So like anyone can go on the internet and type in Harris-Benedict formula or whatever it may be to find out what their projected maintenance calories will be. But you won't know until you do it and you get the feedback.
Right.
So actually track, monitor your weight, and then go, right, when I do that, this happens. And then you've got data. And then you can use that data and you can go, right, I want to increase or decrease based on my goals, my food intake, and go from there. And you've got more data. Because maintenance isn't like 2,500, bang on.
Yeah.
It's like, it's a range, and you're going to hover in a range. Some people's range is bigger than others, but you can have this range. And you go, right, I need to go in a calorie deficit, so I'm going to reduce. And as I get lighter, my maintenance is also going to drop.
Got you. Okay.
So,
because you're a smaller muscle mass.
exactly, you're a smaller person, you then have less food available to you. So then your deficit will have to be lower, and vice versa. So having that data point to go to is really important. And go, when I'm this weight, I'm this active, this is my maintenance. And it's in this range. Higher, lower, that kind of stuff.